Hi everyone, this is a tutorial on some other roles that your kidneys play in maintaining homeostasis in your body. We've looked so far at how the kidneys can filter out our waste from our blood and any excess nutrients and create urine of the appropriate concentrations and then return our blood back to the body at the levels that we need it to be at. So there are some other things that your kidneys do that we're going to look at in this lesson. And this is a note from Edmodo called The Role of Kidneys in Homeostasis. And what I've done is just copied the note into this tutorial so that you can see it here. If you have printed it off, then you've already got this in front of you. But I'm just going to be reading through the sections of it as I talk through the lesson. So in your textbook, this is covered on 353 to 356. So I'm going to begin with water balance. And I've just added to the note here that water balance is also known as osmolarity. It's a fancier term for looking at the concentrations of the solutes in the blood versus the amount of solvent. And if you think about your blood, it's a solution. It's made up mostly of water, and that's the plasma part of your blood. And then you have solid components to it. So you have your blood cells, obviously, and platelets, but you have all kinds of chemicals that are dissolved in your blood, like hormones and amino acids, sugars, vitamins, minerals, and important ions like sodium, potassium, bicarbonate ions, calcium, magnesium. And all of these things create a concentration within your blood, and they exert a sort of pressure in there. So you can think of your blood as having different conditions. It could be really thin. When your blood's really thin, it has a high water concentration compared to the dissolved solutes in it. If your blood is, let's say, thick, that would mean that it has a lot of dissolved solutes in it and not a lot of water. Well, we have to control that osmolarity, or that pressure of the solutes inside the blood, by changing the amount of water in the blood. And this is a really important job that your kidneys do at the nephron level. We've looked at this in class, and this is the whole mechanism of how your kidneys do that now. So when your blood osmotic pressure is really high, that means that there's a lot of solutes in the blood, and it's exerting a pressure against the blood vessels. You have tiny little cells called osmoreceptors inside the hypothalamus, so buried deep in your brain in that really important homeostatic structure called the hypothalamus. You have these important cells. And when they detect that your blood osmotic pressure is too high, they send a signal to the posterior pituitary gland. This is a gland that hangs down off of the hypothalamus in your brain. And it sends a message to that gland to release a hormone called ADH. ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone. Many years ago, it was referred to as vasopressin, so older biologists would call it vasopressin. Some medical doctors still call it that. So the hypothalamus also, when it detects that your blood osmotic pressure is high, it gives you that sensation of thirst. So we've all felt that when we haven't had enough to drink, we've gone a long period of time without having any water, or maybe we've been working out and we've been sweating a lot and we've lost a lot of water through our sweat, our blood osmotic pressure goes up, and our brain tells us that we are thirsty. So we will have that behavioral response of going and getting a glass of water, getting something to drink. On the physiological level, though, ADH gets released from the posterior pituitary gland. It travels through the bloodstream to the tubules of the nephrons in your kidneys. And what ADH does is it changes the permeability of the walls of those distal tubules and the collecting ducts of the nephron. It increases the permeability to water. And so instead of losing a lot of water in your urine, you're going to reabsorb water back into the blood, into those peritubular capillaries, and your urine will become more concentrated. So it'll be, when you're really thirsty, you haven't had a lot to drink, you don't have to urinate very much because you're not making a large volume of urine. And when you do urinate, you discover, oh, it's very dark in color, it might be very smelly, and it's because it's lower in water content. It's your body's way of holding on to water. And so you bring your water balance back to normal, you bring your blood osmotic pressure back to normal by reabsorbing water at the tubule level. And I just have a note here in my note. Here I go again talking about alcohol, but it's just because I want you guys to know about it so you know what you're in for if you do drink alcohol. Alcohol directly inhibits the release of ADH from the pituitary gland. And so you are not going to retain water back in your kidneys, back into the blood, and you're going to produce a lot of urine, and it's going to be very dilute. So when you drink alcohol, you have to go pee a lot, and you lose a lot of water. And this is what causes hangovers. So a hangover really is just you've dehydrated your brain cells out, and that's why you feel so sick the next day. So it's really important if you are going to drink alcohol that you don't drink too much. You have to be modest about it and careful, but also to make sure you're consuming water at the same time. And this is going to protect your body, protect your brain, and even keep you from getting one of those dreaded hangovers. So I don't want to tell you you should be drinking alcohol. You shouldn't be, but I just want to prepare you if you do choose to down the road consume alcohol, drink lots of water with it, and pay attention to your urine. If it's getting really dark in color and it's really smelly, it is too concentrated. You need to consume more water. So here's a feedback loop for ADH. I was going to try and draw this, but it would be really messy if I tried to on this app, so I just took this one from Google Images. And it's got some big language in it, but we'll just work through it here. So we start up at the top, right here. So here's our trigger, an increase in plasma osmolality, or our water balance is off, our osmotic pressure is too high. So we get these two responses. Number one, ADH is released from the posterior pituitary gland, and number two, you get that sensation of thirst. Once you increase your ADH release, that is going to decrease your water excretion by causing you to retain water at the tubules. So remember, this is happening at the nephrons. You drink some water, so you increase your water ingestion, and that also increases your water retention in the body. These two combined effects will decrease your plasma osmolality, or decrease your water, your blood osmotic pressure, I should say. And so then we get the stopping of the release of ADH, and you don't feel thirsty anymore. There's your negative feedback. So I've drawn in that little negative sign to show the negative feedback. So this is a negative feedback loop for the work of ADH when your plasma osmolality is too high, or when your water balance is off. The next role of kidneys in this note is with blood pressure. So when your blood pressure drops too low, there are really special cells near your glomerulus that detect this, and they release an enzyme called renin. Renin gets converted into another enzyme called angiotensinogen, and angiotensinogen gets converted into angiotensin. So you don't have to remember all these names of these three proteins, but just know that renin gets released in the kidneys by the glomerulus, and it causes a couple of different chemical reactions to happen. This final protein, angiotensin, causes vasoconstriction, so narrowing of vessels in your body. And so if you narrow your blood vessels, that's going to raise blood pressure, right? You're forcing the same amount of blood through narrower tubes, blood pressure goes up. So this is what we do when our blood pressure drops too low. The second thing that happens is aldosterone gets released. So this is a hormone. It comes from your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands just sit on top of your kidneys. And so we release aldosterone, and what it does is it goes to the distal tubules and the collecting ducts of the nephrons and causes them to increase sodium. And so if we increase sodium reabsorption at those tubules, water always follows salt, right? You guys know that from osmosis, that water is going to follow that solute. So if we can increase the reabsorption of sodium at these tubules, water is also going to get reabsorbed into the blood. And what would happen to blood pressure if you increase the amount of water in your blood? Well, your blood volume is going to go up, therefore your blood pressure is going to go up. So this is a series of events that will happen, let's say in the case of an emergency, like you've been in a trauma and you've lost a lot of blood. This is what will potentially keep your heart beating. It'll keep your blood pressure high enough to send blood flow to the brain to keep your systems operating. Here's a diagram of that feedback. It's a little bit blurry because, again, I took it from Google Images and blew it up. But if we start Down here at the bottom, here's our trigger, so the blood pressure falls. There's the release of our renin right here from the kidney. Renin causes angiotensinogen to get converted into angiotensin. There's another conversion to a different kind of angiotensin, and angiotensin causes aldosterone to get released from the adrenal cortex, or the adrenal gland. And the adrenal gland causes the kidneys to reabsorb salt or sodium, and with that, water will be reabsorbed. Okay, so water reabsorption goes up. And the combination of salt reabsorption and water reabsorption is going to cause your blood volume to go up, and this is what will cause your blood pressure to rise. We also saw in the note that angiotensin causes vasoconstriction. So with vasoconstriction, sorry, it's really messy, I know, but with vasoconstriction, you get an increase in blood pressure. So you can copy this feedback into your note. I just want to mention too, also for the water balance feedback, you have a water balance feedback diagram on page 353 in your text. And for this one, for blood pressure, you have a feedback loop on 354. So you should be copying feedback loops into your notes just to get you into the practice of copying feedback loops. You can see they can take on a variety of different formats. This one has a picture of a kidney in it. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever the diagram makes sense for you. That's what you should copy down or create. The final role that we're going to talk about in this lesson is that of pH balance. And we've mentioned this before, that the bicarbonate carbon dioxide buffer system is happening throughout your body, but the kidneys play a really big role in this. It really involves your lungs and your brain and the carotid arteries in your neck, all coordinating with the kidneys. So we need to keep our blood pH a little bit basic. It's between 7.3 and 7.5. And we're going to look at this reaction in detail on the next slide, but it just involves removing any excess ions in order to bring the pH up or bring it down, depending on what's needed. So this is the reaction for the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer system, and it is a reversible reaction. That's why we have arrows going in both directions. I'm not going to worry about this stuff over here too much on the side. It's just talking about how there is a bicarbonate ion reserve in the body involving the sodium bicarbonate molecule. So just know that that's over there. We're not going to worry about it, but it can play a role in changing the bicarbonate ion concentration in the blood. So these are our two ions right here that our kidneys control, hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. We can remove excess hydrogen ions if our blood is becoming too acidic, and we can remove more bicarbonate ions if our blood is becoming too basic, to keep it within that range. These two ions combine to form carbonic acid, and your liver can break carbonic acid down into water and carbon dioxide, and then we can get rid of that carbon dioxide by breathing it out. So that's where I say your lungs are involved in this process, because by changing your breathing rate, you can change the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, which has this sort of reverse effect on carbonic acid, which also affects the hydrogen ion and bicarbonate populations in the blood. But this is our main buffer system. I don't think you need to memorize this equation. I would never ask you to reproduce it, but I think you should understand that the kidneys monitor pH and adjust the blood pH by reabsorbing either hydrogen ions or bicarbonate ions in order to adjust the pH. And I'm just going to leave you with this little assignment. This is at the bottom of this note on the roles of kidneys. This is an independent assignment I'm going to be giving the class on kidney diseases. So if you check out your textbook pages 357 to 361, you will see on page 362 there's a question with a table. And the table has a list of common kidney diseases in it. And I would like you to copy out that table into your notes so that you're familiar with these common diseases like kidney stones, for instance, and Bright's disease, and diabetes insipidus, and I'm just looking at my book. What's the fourth one? Drawn a blank. Diabetes mellitus. So these are all diseases of the body that affect the kidney, and I would like you to learn about them. I also want you to read about kidney dialysis and kidney transplants. So read about them, include a short description about what's involved in each of these treatments and what are their limitations. Like what is the impact on a person's life with each of these treatments? Or how come they don't work all the time? What's the problem? Okay, so that's what I'm going to leave you with this note. Bye for now.